All right, guys, we are going to get going. So, obviously, you are here for cultural competency and diversity training. So, one of the mission, vision, and values here at Success is embracing diversity. We're also CARF accredited as a rehab provider. So, this is one of their standards as well. So, it's kind of encompassing both on the cultural end, both staff and clients. So what we're going to go over today is what is diversity, what is cultural competency, and how we kind of assess that in our everyday lives. So diversity, again, you're going to see a lot of the CARF lingo going here because that's where a lot of it comes from. So diversity is differences due to cognitive or physical ability, cultural ethnicity, religion, gender, age, you name it, all of that. But with that, there are various layers. So obviously, you could have personality traits, internal, external, even on an organizational level. CARF did a really nice job of kind of laying that out in terms of a visual. So I want you to look at the circle, kind of think you're going to put yourself right smack in the middle where it says personality, if you see that there. So I want to want you to envision yourselves as if you're an onion, and we're going to sit here and kind of peel back the layers. It's the best visual I can give you. So it starts with you as a person. So it's what makes you you, what makes Madison you, what makes me. It could be we're all different. We all bring unique things. So if you take it outside of that, internal dimensions, so those are the things, race, age, gender. They talk about sexual orientation, maybe your physical ability. So each one of our abilities are going to be different from the staff we work with, from the clients we work with. If you look at it in terms of external, peeling it back one more layer, so that's going to look at like your income, your geographic location. We all come from different areas, different counties even possibly. Education. We all have varying levels of education. Marital status, religion. I'm trying to think what else is up there. Work experience. Could also be your personal habits, what you like to do outside of work, and just your overall appearance. The last layer they talk about is from an organizational level. So it could be the field you're in. Obviously, we're all here at Success. We're working in the same field. But you can encounter people outside of Success that are maybe you're taking the cars to the car wash or to the mechanic. So you're dealing with those kinds of occupations. They talk about seniority. You know, obviously, best example, I'm seeing you guys first when you start. So you guys are kind of here. Then you might have someone who's been here 5 years, 10 years, 12. It goes on and on. They talk about union affiliation. We don't have that there, but it's just kind of giving you those external things. Management status. The one thing that they don't list there that I'd like to kind of bring up is, you know, some of us might be involved in other community organizations. We might volunteer time or be a part of something else, or maybe we all have a second job. So that's where those kinds of things would come into play there. Cultural competency. So that we kind of talked about what diversity was in terms of some physical means. But for someone to be culturally competent, it's kind of a different aspect. And that's what Success is looking at for you all to kind of embrace those types of things. So it's looking at having awareness of your own cultural identity and views about difference and the ability to learn and build upon that. You're going to be working with staff. There could be families coming in, funders, you name it. We all have different thoughts, abilities in terms of communications, our own beliefs and values. So what CARF did is they looked at 6 stages of cultural competence. So on the very left end, we're going to start with cultural destructiveness. So this is obviously where you don't want to be. This is someone who's intentionally denying or rejecting your culture. They may make blatant comments, say things, make it uncomfortable. if you experience this in any way, shape, or form, this is why you guys have supervisors, whether it be from a client or staff, please reach out to someone. I always like to say at this point, yes, I do the training. My office is up in the main day program area. I always encourage people, like, we all have our safe people to go to. So it may not be me, but my office is a safe place. I'm a part of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. So safe space if you ever need to talk about or you're concerned with something that happened. But definitely find someone. Cultural incapacity is the next step up. So that's where someone, they accept that you're there, but they don't want to work with you. So for instance, Madison, I'm going to put you on the spot, but so say I'm working with you and you know what, I don't like you, I don't want to, and I'm going to make it known. I'm going to go to the TL, to the scheduling team. I'm going to schedule myself outside of that. That is an incapacity. I am outright saying I don't want to work with you. That is not acceptable. You know, we all just need to be professional, respect one another when we're working to, you know, achieve our common goal. Maybe it's getting the client to bed. Maybe it's just getting through the shift. Maybe it's just getting through like that first 5 minutes, whatever it is that you're doing. The one they kind of put in the middle, that's the next one, it's cultural blindness. I almost feel like this one's kind of just as harsh as any of them. And they'll talk about this a little bit in the video. That's where people assume you're like. So it's like they take a universal approach. They're not saying your differences, you have differences, I have differences, we're all the same. Well, we're not. We're not made the same. We don't have the same values and beliefs. We may have things in common, but we're all not the same. Where you want to be and where success, obviously, in terms of mission, vision, and values is between that like cultural sensitivity and obviously cultural competency. Cultural sensitivity is the first one. It's just kind of your willingness to learn and understand other cultures. So it's not saying you have to be, oh, I knew I was going to do that. Sorry, I'm getting used to the new laptop. So it's not saying you have to understand everything that's there, but just be willing to kind of like sit and talk. One of my biggest examples is, especially when you're working with the clients, you know, sometimes just having a 2-3 minute conversation with them can mean the world to them. And you could actually learn just a lot in that short, brief period of time. You know, same with the staff, you know, the worst someone's going to tell you is, no, I'm not comfortable talking about that. And that's fine. You say, okay, I respect that. But at least if you're willing to kind of be open, it bridges that gap. Cultural competency, that's where you're clearly working in those cross-cultural situations. There's no issues. You're using resources. You're having those conversations. And on the far right, nobody is expecting this. This is where you're culturally proficient, you know, so you might be out there advocating, you might be protesting, being involved in things. Nobody's saying we all have to go to those things. However, it's great if you are involved in stuff outside of here. So just looking a little deeper, we're going to look at 4 categories: awareness, attitude, knowledge, and skills when it comes to cultural competence. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we were looking at the definition, but it's being aware of your own personal reactions. What you, almost like when people say, what are your biases? What are your thoughts? To who are different. You know, cultural awareness it's shaped by our background. It influences how we interpret the world, perceive others, relate to people. You know, I always tell people I'm very much aware when I'm in a meeting or, you know, lately when we were doing stuff on Teams, I am not a poker player. My facial expressions will definitely tell someone what's going on. I can't mask them. I can't hide them. So it's something I know at the end. So if I'm seeing those quizzical faces back or someone might be questioning, clearly there must be something that I'm putting off. So that's something I have to recognize, and it's happened to me. You know, maybe I'm sending a follow-up email or talking with someone, I'm a very emotional being, so it just comes out. So it has to be something that you know about yourself and that you're aware of, because others might be reading more into that or perceiving something. Now that's very surface level for me. Obviously we could go deeper, but it's just an example I'd like to share. So it's kind of just being aware of those things when you come into situations. Attitude, that's why that sticky's on there. It's my favorite. Attitude is everything. Both positive and negative evaluations. Obviously, if we're coming into things positively, people in our environment are going to pick up on that. Our clients especially, they are super sensitive to everything around them. Sometimes I feel like some of them are more sensitive than me. And they can tell when you're having a bad day. They know what's going on. They can pick up on those things. It's hard. People tell you, just check everything at the door when you come in. We all have stuff going on. Again, it's just finding the people that you have that are safe to you, who you can talk to about things. So that way you don't feel like you're carrying so much. And obviously the difference between building awareness of cultural bias and beliefs in general kind of starts with your attitude. So knowledge, get to know your peers, get to know the clients. Again, you don't have to be best friends with them. It's great if people develop social relationships. That naturally happens in any type of workplace. But it's just, keeping your beliefs, your knowledge kind of consistent. Take the time to learn. We do have policies in place. So again, if things aren't happening, or I should say if something is happening that is really impacting you and you're feeling some type of way about it, please talk with someone. Skills, that's just putting it into action. I like the last bullet, you can have the right attitude, you can have self-awareness, a lot of knowledge about things, but if you don't have the skill to put those things into place, you're just kind of talking. Show me that you mean it. Put those things into action. So I did give you guys some sheets in terms of communication that goes a little bit further, but we're going to talk a little bit about language and diversity before we go into the video. So language not only expresses ideas, but it shapes our thoughts. So if you think about it, when we're watching the news, when we're seeing stuff around us, or maybe we're at the grocery store and we see an interaction that everything that we're observing is shaping us. So think about it when you're working with the clients. They're hearing, they're seeing. Yes, there's brain trauma, so they might not be processing, but they're taking all that stuff in too. Adopt a positive, curious, non-judgmental approach towards all individuals. That is easy to do, easy to say, but hard to do sometimes, especially if you have a client who's maybe being overly verbal. But try to find a way, use your team, look at the different approaches, kind of take that non-judgmental. It's really hard not to take things personally, but you definitely want to try to keep that in the back of your mind as much as you can. Remember, we're never only one thing, but instead members of many groups. I'm sure if we took the time to kind of go around the table, we can figure things out. Like, for example, I'm a mom. I'm a college student right now. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. Like all those things, the things that we all take for granted, that's when I say we're a part of many groups. We are so many groups, more so than we can think of. Same with our clients. They might be part of many groups. They may practice a particular religion. They may have certain family members. They may be someone's uncle. And just use simple language. I know a lot of times, sometimes we're trained to use different things. I always have these conversations when I'm talking with PT, OT, because they're putting things in abbreviation. And I'm like, I do not function that way. What are those things? So just think simple. When you're talking with someone, simple. And of course, ask questions. There's never any silly questions. On the person side of thing, general rule of thumb, always put the person first. You never want to say brain injured person. It's person with a brain injury. The brain injury is not the sole thing that defines them. That's just a piece of them. Use language that emphasizes abilities rather than limitation. Good example there, they're not wheelchair bound. They're a person that's in a wheelchair. So that's something they use to get around. That doesn't mean that they still can't walk maybe 50 feet or get up, stand, pivot, those kinds of things. Avoid negative, value-laden terms. And then obviously I listed some examples there. We just kind of talked about it. Person with disability, they're not a victim. Big one is a lot of, you'll see people kind of showing the generation they grew up in suffers from or suffering. That was a really big thing with older generations. Deformed, unfortunately. Still hear that on occasion, sadly. And as I mentioned, person with traumatic brain injury, not brain injured. The other word I've heard people use is mobility impairment. I just usually kind of focus on what they are, or what they're using, I should say, not what they are. So if they're using a walker or a wheelchair, those are things that assist them. They're not confined to that. They're not crippled or invalid, those kinds of things. Have you guys ever heard the term microaggressions? Okay. I'm going to be flat out honest with you. When I did this years ago, I honestly did not know much about microaggressions. In all my schooling, I'm a licensed social worker. You would think in that field, but it's definitely a newer term that's developed. So I always like to put it out there because, to be honest with you, till I was putting this together, didn't really know too much. I think kind of assumptions were made, which is a big thing. Never make assumptions with different things. But the video, it's a really good one. I'm just going to ask you to, it comes from a classroom setting. Take the classroom out of that and try to implement as if this was success, because these things can happen. The nice thing at the end, you'll kind of see teachers, and again, kind of insert like maybe staff, clin, admin in those roles. They talk about instances they have and kind of what they've done. Some people are very comfortable naming it what it is. Some people don't like that confrontation. So something to think about while you're watching the video is kind of where you are, knowing and being aware of what you bring. And if you're not that confrontation person, who is it you can go to say, hey, this happened? Because we can't fix things here if we don't know. So if you guys are seeing something, please say something. But they're going to go through micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations.
Think about a time when someone said something about some aspect of your identity that made you feel insulted or slighted. Even if they didn't intend it, you probably experienced a microaggression.
A microaggression is something that someone says to someone else without knowing that it may be offensive.
It hurts. So that's how I know it's a microaggression, because it feels disrespectful.
And it's not like outright racism, but it's something that is like almost unconscious in the way that you view people.
Most microaggressions are subtle and indirect, but they occur frequently in the daily interactions of members of historically underrepresented groups. And most often, people who commit microaggressions think of themselves as well-intentioned, non-racist, non-sexist people. They do not realize that the underlying messages communicated by their actions or comments are hurtful to other people.
One of my friends asked if my parents had their papers. I had a science teacher, a physics teacher, and he told me that I was the smartest black girl in his class. I've been asked if I understood what they were talking about, or do you need any translation stuff just based on my name?
I'm not the spokesperson for the whole black community, but that's a microaggression I do experience a lot. Like, they want the black perspective. And I'm usually the only black girl in the class. So it's like, okay, what's your take on this?
Oftentimes I get asked, like, do you know how to speak your native language? And when I answer I do, it's just like, they're like, okay, well, what does Ching Chao mean?
There are 3 types of microaggressions: micro-assaults, micro-insults, and micro-invalidations. A micro-assault is similar to what we think of as overt discrimination. In the case of micro-assaults, those acts are intentional.
I was a server for a long time, and if anyone else was, you know this. In the back of the kitchen, like when someone gets a table of, like, say, Indian people, I hope this is PC, I don't know all the terms, but like Indian people or black people or anyone, they'd be like, who wants that table? I don't want it, they're not gonna tip. And my heart would break every time.
I used to be a server too, and I hated it because I was like the only person of, like, you know, any type of race other than white. I remember coming in and they'd be like, oh, Danielle, you get that table of raccoons, and I was like, what? And they were like, yeah. And then I would go and I'm like, they're black people, and I was like, wait, is that what you call black people? You call them raccoons?
A micro-assault can be the deliberate posting of swastikas, Confederate flags, racial slurs or epithets that are left on a blackboard in a classroom.
I work as a research assistant, and so a while ago, one of the our new RAs, when I was a few months into it, came up to me and just mentioned that even though we'd known each other for months at that point, you know, you're the least scary black guy I've ever met. You know, in the way that I dress, the way that I talk, the way that I speak, I've kind of tailored that over the course of my education to be non-threatening.
I will literally have like my keys in my hand, like they're always with me, and I'll just like jingle them as I'm walking so that they know that I know that I'm there, so that we both know that I'm right here and I'm not gonna try and do anything to be stupid. But on that note, there's also the stigma that like we're aggressive and intimidating.
It's sad you have to make sure you let people know you're not a threat. And that's objective.
One of my friends commented to me, he said, you know, I don't really even think you're black, you know, and I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I mean, you're smart, you do your work, yes, you're athletic, but you do your work, you're smart. So I don't really know if you're black. I was like, I didn't understand. It made me question who I was and if I was still a part of the culture.
And that's an example of micro-invalidation and a micro-insult. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. A micro-insult is a comment that communicates the demographic group is not respected, that person is a slight exception to the stereotype. It's an insult, even though the perpetrator thinks he has just rendered a compliment.
Well, here at UNT, I've heard, you're so pretty for a black girl. I feel like it discounts me as a person, and then I feel like it discounts my race. I feel like you can be pretty just because you're a woman, or, you know, or all black women are beautiful, all people of color are beautiful, just the same as people that are not people of color. So for them to make that specific statement, that's what I'm like, why? What in you made you say that to me? As if it were a compliment. So another type of micro-insult is when students in the classroom are dismissed or treated almost as if they're invisible. For instance, in some of our sciences or engineering classes, there are few women, and professors often don't call on those women.
I had one instance in a statistics-based class where we were discussing something bell curve related, and he presented a question, and I don't remember exactly what the answer was, but I answered it, and he kind of doubted me. And he very condescendingly was just like, oh, okay, well, I mean, like, this is the best answer, but I guess your answer could be right. You know what, we'll ask, it was a grad student. He was like, you know what, we'll ask Dr. So-and-so and see what he thinks the best answer is. And there was no apology or anything. He was just like, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so said that, yeah, that was actually a really acceptable answer. And I was just like, okay. What else is he going to doubt me on, and when else am I going to be called out in front of 70 other people, you know, and have a weird exchange that makes the whole room quiet? Like,
one of my science classes, my teacher had asked what I wanted to do, and I told the teacher that I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And the
immediately. They're like, that's too hard for you. Maybe you should try a different field. Or have you ever thought about being a nurse practitioner? Nurse practitioners in psychiatry make pretty well, they make a lot of money too. Have you thought about that? Like, why go to med school?
Genuinely, sometimes somebody might feel like they can't make it, you know, and then when you continue to tell them that, it does hurt, you know.
I've had a lot of professors tell me to my face that they were surprised that I was as good as a student as I was, and that I paid attention in class and actually participated. And when I asked why, they said, well, you know, you just come off as a troublemaker. You have all these piercings and short hair as a girl and tattoos, and we just naturally assumed that you weren't really going to be any good.
Another type of micro insult is when a professor says to a student, wow, you speak really good English. The message is the professor thinks I don't really belong here, or that I'm not really American. Of course I speak good English. I was born in the United States. But the professor sees a Latina or an Asian and makes the assumption that that person is foreign, or at least that is what the target hears. What is the underlying message when somebody asks if you're legal?
That you don't belong to this country.
That you don't belong, that's right.
We were walking into the gym once, and I was a guest, so I had to hand the person my ID. And he was looking at my name and everything. He's like, what are you? And I was like, well, what are you asking? He's like, what nationality are you? I was like, okay, I'm Lebanese, I'm Arab.
He's like, you got one of those that blow things up, are you? No offense though. What kind of crazy stuff do you ask someone? You get what I'm saying?
And I was just really surprised. Like, it totally blew my mind that someone would think that.
The assumptions I get the most is that I'm very academic and that I'm very good at math. When they assume stuff like that, it makes me feel like they're taking the individual out of who I am and just assuming that all the people who look like me act like me, and that kind of makes me feel lesser of what I can do.
The teacher was asking if someone could translate something in Spanish, because he was giving an example, and he needed this one word to be translated in Spanish. And he just stared at me specifically when he was asking, and I knew we were making eye contact, because after, I just stayed quiet, because I was like, I'm pretty sure there's other people in this class that know Spanish, but he just kept staring at me. And at some point, the rest of the class turned to look at me, waiting for a response. And I was like, I'm not going to give you guys an answer. This is not okay.
Our teacher pulled me aside because they were doing something for Christmas, like Toys for Tots or something. And he had this bicycle. They had a bicycle they were going to give to the kids. And he came up to me and was like, hey, I need to switch out the seats on this bike, and it seems like somebody like you would know how to do that. So if you could just change it out for me, that'd be great. And so I was like, oh, okay, sure, not really thinking much of it. And then later on, I kind of thought to myself, that's odd. Why would he assume that I knew personally how to switch, a bike seat? So I thought that was an odd kind of maybe a micro insult on the fact that he assumed just because maybe I'm Latino that I'm good with my hands or something like that.
A micro invalidation is a comment or action that dismisses the experiences of historically disadvantaged group members. Micro invalidations can happen when, for instance, when a student is lamenting that she wishes there were more Latina faculty, for instance. And the students in the class start rolling their eyes, or, oh, come on, get over it. And the professor goes along with the students instead of with the person who made the lament. Another type of micro-invalidation, one that we hear a lot about today, is being colorblind. When people say, I don't notice you're black. I don't notice you're Latina. I don't see color. What does that mean? How do you interpret that? What are people saying when they say, I don't notice your race, I don't see color? How do you interpret that?
They're just trying to say that they're not racist. But they don't look at that side of you and they just want to validate you as a person, but it comes off wrong because it's like your race is very much who you are as an individual.
In a lot of my mini classes, I have to do writings, and it's just professors seem to be like don't want to hurt my feelings because I'm an international student, so mine is not that good, especially with my writing. So they let me go easy, I just feel like they have different expectations for international student and just American students, and like a lot of feedback that I get from like my writings is just like not very meaningful, because I just feel like they just try not to hurt my feelings, try to go easy on me, but then by doing that I just feel like it takes toll on my like development, like my learning, my writing and art stuff.
So what do you do if you are not the person who commits the microaggression as the professor? What if someone else in the classroom commits it?
What I usually do is I name it. When I hear it in the room, a microaggression that a student says, it may not be directed to a particular student, but there are probably students in the room who will feel as if they have been microaggressed against. I will name that. I think we've just had a difficult comment made that not everybody's comfortable with. What are people feeling in the room right now? Did anyone feel uncomfortable with that? And then if there's silence, which there oftentimes is because people aren't comfortable about calling each other on things, I will talk about what it is that I heard. I will model the behavior of instigating a difficult dialogue. And usually once I do that, then people will come back.
The impact on students that can be harmful is that it creates an uncomfortable environment or climate. It can be very stressful. Some of the research shows that it can affect people's health because of the stress. But I think one of the big things is that you just don't feel like you belong or are included. And especially when we're trying to create a campus where diversity is valued and where everybody feels included, they get in the way of that goal.
Just recently, I caught myself making one, and as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I realized that I had made this exact mistake that I was just talking about, like overgeneralizing to an entire group or class of people. And I saw tears well up in her eyes. And I said, I'm so sorry. I am absolutely positive that I have said something to hurt you. And I think I know why. But I would really like to hear from your perspective what just happened here.
So common microaggressions committed by faculty in the classroom include the following: mispronouncing students' names after they have repeatedly corrected you, referring to students by the wrong pronouns, calling on men while ignoring women in class discussions, or calling only on white students and ignoring the students of color in your classroom, scheduling tests or projects during religious or cultural holidays. Be aware of assigning projects that disregard socioeconomic status. Be aware of using heterosexist examples in class. When professors give heteronormative examples, atoms attract like males and females, or there's an assumption of bring your girlfriend or bring your boyfriend, an assumption that you're heterosexual. We make an assumption that heterosexuals are the normal people.
One of the biggest things is pronouns when it comes to transgendered people, individuals, because sometimes they'll tell you, hey, I prefer these pronouns, and when a person doesn't choose to go by, female pronouns or male pronouns, it invalidates their person.
A little thing with the misgendering thing, everyone messes up, it's okay. If you do misgender like me or someone else that's trans, or even someone that's cis, just apologize and move on. Don't make the apology about yourself, but just say, oh, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and then move on. Don't make it a constant thing though, because we'll pick up on that. So yeah, just a little side note on that.
As a faculty member, you are responsible for the climate in that classroom. You, the professor, the faculty member, are responsible for every single person's sense of belonging in that classroom. You are responsible for every person's opportunity to learn.
I think in a broader spectrum, we have to get to know each other or just not make assumptions. People don't realize that we are a lot more alike than we are different.
People say that for other people, like you're so black or you're so Mexican, you're so Asian. And to me, that takes away from who I am as a person, even though it groups and stereotypes me with other people. And I don't like when people do that.
It makes you feel like you shouldn't be who you are. You know, it makes you feel like they're basically trying to tell you that you should be doing something else. Like they're not able to accept you for the person that you are and the person you're trying to show them that you are. Instead, they're just telling you like, oh, that's not right. That's not a good fit. And I mean, nobody wants to feel that way. Everybody wants to feel, accepted for who they are, no matter, what situation they're put in.
So ageism. Obviously we could sit here all day and talk about, diversity stuff in general. There typically can be 8 hours, some days 2-day trainings on this. But the one takeaway from here, because obviously you guys can all read, is age is honestly just a number. I know you guys hear this a lot of times. I've heard it a lot of times. But I mean, I'm not young anymore, and I'll admit some of the younger staff that are coming in, especially some of them that are right out of high school, people immediately like, well, they don't have the experience. How are they gonna, they have to learn from me. A lot of times I'm learning from them as I grow. I will be the first. My kid is more technologically inclined than I am, and she tells me what I need to do. So like there are certain things that's just one example that people can bring. On the flip side, sometimes people struggle with, not to leave that middle layer out, but people who are a bit older will, can they physically work? Can they do these things? But they're obviously here for a reason. So that's where I just like to stress here, like try to go into a situation, especially like what they talked about with the microaggressions, don't have those assumptions. Because I feel like I learned so much on all of the age spectrum. And we all just bring so much different things to it. It's not about the years of experience. Yes, those things are great, don't get me wrong. But sometimes someone's perspective can just flip a switch for somebody. Race, ethnicity, kind of put a slide in there just to, race is like, it's the physical features. Believe it or not, some people don't understand the difference, but it's our physical appearance, our eye color, our hair color. Whereas ethnicity, that's your nationality, culture, your ancestry, maybe those language beliefs. So race is kind of more of that social construct, not an actual biological construct. So like when you guys are sitting there at the doctor's office hasn't done it as of late, but they're asking you to check off where you are, they're like conforming us to construct to those things. But in actuality, so that's the difference. Do have to talk a little bit about this, gender identity, sexual orientation. We're also in Pride Month today. This is June, so Pride you got going on. But sexual orientation, so that is more the emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to other people, and it's independent of their gender identity. So this is, in terms of sexual orientation, it could be male, female. They list them all here, lesbian, gay, bisexual. Whereas gender identity, it's the one's most innermost concept of their self as male, female. Maybe they're a blend of both, maybe neither. It's how they are perceiving themselves. So I know just recently, in a lot of stuff you're seeing, have you guys seen more non-binary things when they go male, female, non-binary? Some will go gender binary. They don't want to disclose. You can go the gamut. I will admit I am not the most knowledgeable in all of these, but they go through gender expression, gender expansive, gender fluid, gender non-conforming, gender queer, transgender, those kinds of things. But again, it's just putting it out there that we're respecting all. Spiritual beliefs. The example I like to use here is, obviously we respect all. One of the rights of a person who resides here is their right to practice religion. We had an individual, this was many years ago, who had a set prayer schedule. They needed to go back to their room so that they could do their prayers. So we developed that into their schedule. We have tried to find, the nice thing is now, especially with COVID, the one blessing out of all of that is there's so much more stuff available online. Whereas whether it's Buddhism, Judaism, we will try to find whatever we can so an individual can still practice their faith. On the flip side, I also like to encourage you guys, yes, I think it's like 7 holidays that it's either 7 or 8, I lose track, that we recognize and are off for. But that doesn't mean you have Diwali, Kwanzaa, the Jewish holidays. We could all probably sit here and go on and on with different things, that those aren't important. So if there's something your family, celebrates, or there's something you believe in that is really important that you do, I have had staff members request off for those things. Yes, you have your schedule, this is what you work, but if this is something that's important to you, talk to your supervisor, talk with someone. You could be like, hey, I know this is on a Tuesday, but let me come in on that Monday when I'm off so that I can practice with my family. People have done that, so it's on both ends of the spectrum. Socioeconomic status and culture, you obviously know that. Although I will say I paid, what was it, $2 something for a dozen and a half of eggs. I still firmly believe there was a sale, because the other week I was paying like $5 for them or something. It was something outrageous. It's big right now, the whole issue with inflation, kind of where people are at, just with things. It's something that we can't discount. Unfortunately, it's our income level. Could be based off of education, occupation. Some people also that impact socioeconomic status. It could be family and support. Look at our clients for that matter. They may not have the family support. So what they get for Social Security, especially think about an individual that was injured in their teenage years, no work history, they're getting a very bare minimum. And I'm saying, I've had one individual in the past, I think it was only around $400 or $500 a month. So you think of these things, and I'm giving you extremes, but there is reality there. So not only clients, we have, staff who might be coming in certain things, and that could be impacting their views on things, their take in the world around. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind, that those things can kind of hit us all a little differently. We're not, all viewing things the same. But just to wrap this up, I'm not going to read each of them. I'm just going to pick out a couple of ones that I think are just to really highlight is just be open. I cannot stress that enough. Come in with an open mind. Keep, that clear conscience. Sometimes it's hard. We all got things going on. I got a teenager, soon to be kid that's going to be driving. That's probably going to put me on edge and super nervous at certain times. And I'm aware of that. I know that's coming. But be open as best you can. Model, mentor. What you're putting out there, others are also going to take in. So model that. Challenge the stereotypes. Again, in a way that works for you. If you don't like confrontation, I get it. It's not everyone's thing. But go find someone, talk to someone. Obviously, with what our MVVs are at, it's having a safe, secure environment to work in. You are dealing with a population who has traumatic brain injury, so they can be impulsive. They can say things. That does not mean it's right. It can be triggering to people, but please know that they're not attempting to personally attack. Sometimes also the personal values they're bringing from how they were brought up in may be carried over. One thing I will say with brain injury, their long-term tends to be better intact than their short-term. So unfortunately, the things that maybe how their parents viewed things not in a very good way, or their grandparents or wherever that came from, they're going to hold on to that. But certainly if that's happening, we have the ability to kind of shift staff around. We have the ability to say, okay, that's not healthy, so let's kind of see what we can do. That's why we have, the large number of staff and people to support you in that. And just be willing to listen. It's big. So that's my spiel. It's very short and sweet. Like I said, we could go on and on and on, but I thank you guys for taking the time today. And please, my door's always open. Even if it's closed and I'm in a meeting, I mean that sincerely. If there's any issues, please let us know.